My family saw me as the black sheep, the one who'd never amount to anything. They even called an emergency meeting to fix my so-called jobless life. Little did they know I was about to close a $1.5 billion deal. This is the story of how I turned 5 years of condescension into the ultimate "I told you so" moment. My name is Cecilia, I'm 32 years old, and my family has always seen me as the disappointing one. When I saw the group text about an emergency meeting to discuss my jobless situation, I almost laughed. If only they knew I was about to announce a $1.5 billion acquisition of my tech company. 5 years of condescension were about to end in the most satisfying way possible. Before I tell you how my family's jaws dropped when they learned about my success, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, and subscribe to hear more stories about proving doubters wrong. I grew up in a traditional Boston family where predictability was prized above all else. My father, Robert, was an accountant at the same firm for 30 years, methodically climbing the corporate ladder until he reached middle management. My mother, Teresa, taught high school English for her entire career. Their lives were stable, conventional, and exactly what they wanted for their 3 children. My 2 older brothers followed the script perfectly. Nicholas became a civil engineer, married his college sweetheart, and settled in a suburb just 20 minutes from our parents. Thomas went to law school, joined a respectable firm, and purchased a colonial-style house with a white picket fence in the same neighborhood as our childhood home. They were the golden children, the ones who did everything right according to our family values. Then there was me, Cecilia, the youngest and the only daughter. From childhood, I was different. While my brothers collected sports trophies and perfect report cards, I was tinkering with computers and dreaming up business ideas. At 12, I built websites for neighborhood businesses. At 16, I created an online marketplace for students to exchange textbooks that spread to 3 local high schools. "That's a cute hobby," my father would say, patting my head. "But make sure it doesn't interfere with your studies. You need to focus on getting into a good college." College was where our paths really diverged. My parents expected me to pursue law like Thomas or perhaps medicine. Instead, I chose to study business with a focus on technology entrepreneurship. The disappointment was palpable. "Business is so general," my mother said, her lips pursed. "What kind of job will you even get with that?" "Something practical and stable, I hope," my father added. To appease them after graduation, I took a job at a respected tech firm. For 3 years, I worked my way up from junior product manager to team lead. My family finally seemed satisfied. I had benefits, a retirement plan, and a title they could brag about to their friends. But I was miserable. Every day felt like wearing shoes that were 2 sizes too small. The corporate bureaucracy suffocated my creativity. The endless meetings and political maneuvering drained my energy. I watched as my ideas were diluted through committees or worse, appropriated by senior managers. Meanwhile, the technology landscape was evolving rapidly, and I saw opportunities everywhere that my company was too slow to pursue. At 27, after months of working nights and weekends on my business plan, I made the decision that would scandalize my family. I quit my good job to start my own company. The Sunday dinner when I announced my decision remains seared in my memory. My father choked on his roast beef. My mother dropped her fork with a clatter. Nicholas stared at me like I had announced plans to join the circus. "You did what?" my father finally managed to say. "I left global tech to start my own company," I repeated. "I've been developing a new approach to data security that smaller businesses can actually afford." "So you're unemployed?" Thomas concluded, exchanging knowing glances with our parents. "No, I am self-employed," I corrected. "I'm an entrepreneur." "Honey," my mother said, reaching for my hand, "being between jobs is nothing to be ashamed of. Thomas knows someone in HR at his firm. I'm sure they could find something for you." And that set the tone for the next 5 years. Every family gathering became an inquisition about my employment status. My parents called weekly to ask if I'd found a real job yet. Nicholas regularly sent me job listings for entry-level positions. Thomas offered monthly to put in a good word at his law firm for administrative roles. "You know, Cecilia," my mother would say during our calls, "security is so important. Look at Nicholas and Thomas. They never have to worry about paying their bills or health insurance." My father took a more direct approach. Have you thought about your retirement? Every year you waste on this project is a year you're not contributing to a 401k. Over time, I learned to be vague about my work. When they asked how business was going, I would shrug and say, I'm making it work, or still figuring things out. It was easier than explaining the details only to have them dismissed. The emotional distance grew. I stopped sharing my small victories and breakthroughs. When I secured my first major client, I celebrated with a bottle of champagne alone in my apartment rather than call my family. When I hired my first employee, the only congratulations came from my college roommate and a former colleague who had believed in me enough to join my venture. Holiday gatherings became exercises in patience. I would sit quietly as my brothers discussed their promotions and bonuses, their growing 401k balances, and company stock options. My parents beamed with pride at their sons while shooting concerned glances my way. Cecilia is still doing her computer thing, my mother would explain to relatives with the same tone one might use to describe an unfortunate medical condition. The subtle digs accumulated like paper cuts. At my 30th birthday dinner, Thomas asked if I needed help with the bill, assuming I couldn't afford my own celebration. When I moved to a new apartment, my father insisted on reviewing the lease to make sure I wasn't being taken advantage of in my situation. Nicholas once introduced me to his friend as my little sister who's trying to figure out her career. Each slight reinforced my determination to succeed, but also deepened the wound of familial rejection. The people who should have been my biggest supporters had become my most consistent doubters. And despite all my professional growth, a part of me still craved their approval, still wanted to prove them wrong in the most undeniable way possible. Little did they know that opportunity was about to present itself in a way none of us could have imagined. The early days of Innovate Tech Solutions were exactly what my family feared. I worked from my studio apartment, converted my dining table into a desk, and subsisted largely on ramen noodles and coffee. My savings dwindled as I poured everything into developing my data security platform. The first client was a local bakery chain needing to secure customer payment information. The owner took a chance on me after a larger security firm quoted them a price that would have consumed their entire annual tech budget. I built a custom solution at a quarter of the cost, working 80-hour weeks to deliver it. Word spread among small business owners. A boutique clothing store came next, then a regional accounting firm, followed by a chain of fitness studios. Each client presented unique challenges, forcing me to innovate and expand my system's capabilities. I reinvested every dollar of profit back into the business. 18 months after founding Innovate Tech, I secured a meeting with Horizon Ventures, a venture capital firm known for backing innovative startups. I rehearsed my pitch for weeks, refining my business plan and growth projections until I could recite them in my sleep. The meeting was scheduled for 2 hours. It lasted 4. 3 weeks later, Horizon offered $3 million in funding for a 15% stake in my company. The validation was intoxicating. For the first time, someone with significant financial expertise looked at my business and saw not a risky experiment, but a valuable investment. With funding came growth. I moved operations from my apartment to a small office space and hired 5 employees. 6 months later, we expanded to a team of 15 and moved again. The following year, we reached 50 employees and secured our first major enterprise client, a retail chain with over 200 locations nationwide. Our breakthrough product was SecureShield, a scalable security platform that adapted to businesses of all sizes. Unlike competitors that offered one-size-fits-all solutions or prohibitively expensive custom systems, SecureShield could grow with a company, offering affordable entry points and seamless scaling options. When data breaches began making headlines, our client list exploded. 3 years after that first VC investment, Innovate Tech employed over 200 people across 3 offices. We had clients in 48 states and 6 countries. Our annual revenue exceeded $70 million, and the company valuation had reached $300 million. I hired Jordan as my executive assistant during this growth phase. Smart, efficient, and fiercely loyal, she quickly became my right hand, managing my chaotic schedule and serving as gatekeeper to the increasing demands on my time. She was also one of the few people who knew about my family situation, having witnessed my muted reactions to their condescending texts and calls. "Why don't you just tell them?" she asked once after overhearing a particularly frustrating call with my mother. Because they wouldn't believe it, I replied. Or they'd find some way to diminish it. It's just a phase. I got lucky. The bubble will burst. I've heard it all before. The truth was more complicated. Part of me feared their rejection of my success would hurt more than their dismissal of my struggles. Another part wanted a vindication so complete it would be impossible to deny. And perhaps the most painful admission, I worried that once they knew I was successful, they would only value me for my money rather than understanding my passion and vision. So I maintained the charade. When featured in Business Insider as one of the top 30 entrepreneurs under 30, I didn't send the article to my family. When invited to speak at tech conferences, I didn't share the video links. When photographed with industry leaders at innovation summits, I kept the images off social media where relatives might see them. At family gatherings, I deflected questions about work with practiced vagueness. Business is picking up, I would say, or we're working on some interesting projects. If pressed, I would mention working with local businesses on computer security, terminology deliberately chosen to sound small and unthreatening. The irony became increasingly absurd. My brothers would offer financial advice while I managed a multi-million-dollar budget. My father would lecture me about career stability while I created hundreds of jobs. My mother would worry about my health insurance while I provided premium coverage for my entire workforce. At my cousin's wedding, my grandmother patted my hand and whispered, "Don't worry, dear. Not everyone blooms early. You'll find your path." I thanked her politely, not mentioning that I had just closed a $20 million round of funding that morning. The isolation weighed on me. Success without the ability to share it with loved ones felt hollow at times. I built a network of fellow entrepreneurs who understood the unique pressures of building a company, but the family-shaped hole remained. Then came the offer from Global Systems, a tech giant looking to strengthen their security division. Their initial approach was tentative, just executives inquiring if I might consider acquisition discussions. As talks progressed over weeks, the numbers grew increasingly serious. What began as a theoretical conversation crystallized into a concrete offer. $1.5 billion, with provisions for me to remain CEO of what would become their security division. The due diligence process was exhausting, with teams of lawyers and accountants examining every aspect of Innovate Tech. Jordan managed the chaos, masterfully coordinating document transfers and scheduling the endless meetings while shielding me from unnecessary disruptions. After 2 months of negotiations, we reached the final stage. The board meeting was scheduled for Friday. The press release was drafted. The celebration for employees was planned. 5 years of work was about to culminate in one of the largest tech acquisitions of the year. And that's when my family decided we needed an emergency meeting about my joblessness. Friday morning found me in my penthouse office overlooking Boston Harbor, reviewing the final acquisition documents with our legal team. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city where I had grown up feeling small and misunderstood. Now I commanded a view from above, a physical manifestation of how far I had come. My phone buzzed with a notification. Normally I would ignore it during such an important meeting, but a glance showed it was the Family Matters group chat. Something in me always responded to those notifications with a Pavlovian mix of dread and hope. I excused myself and stepped away from the conference table to check the message. My father had written in all caps, "Emergency meeting tonight. We need to discuss your jobless situation." Before I could process this, more messages appeared. "Mom. Sweetie, we're all worried sick about your future. It's been 5 years of this business experiment. Please come over at 7 p.m. We just want to help. Nicholas. Found some entry-level marketing positions that might work for someone with your unconventional background. We'll bring the listings tonight. Thomas. Actually, our receptionist just gave notice. No experience necessary and the benefits are excellent. We can discuss tonight." I stared at my phone, emotions crashing through me in waves. First came the hurt, as familiar as an old scar that never fully healed. Then anger bubbled up, hot and clarifying. Frustration followed, not just with them but with myself for still caring what they thought. The messages triggered memories of every dismissive comment, every condescending offer of help, every pained expression when explaining my career choice to others. I remembered Christmas dinner 3 years ago when my father had raised his glass in a toast to Nicholas's promotion to senior engineer, to Thomas making partner, and to Cecilia. Well, we're sure next year will be your year to finally find your path. Actually, I had started to say, my company just secured a major client that will double our revenue. But my mother had quickly jumped in. Let's not talk business at Christmas, dear. Thomas, tell us more about the Parker case. Then there was the family vacation to Cape Cod last summer. My brothers discussed investment strategies while I sat quietly on the deck. When I tried to join the conversation, Thomas patted my shoulder. Don't worry about this boring financial stuff, sis. We know money's tight for you. I had been in the process of purchasing a multi-million-dollar office building that week. Most painful was my grandmother's 80th birthday when Aunt Linda asked what I did for work. Before I could answer, my mother jumped in. Cecilia is in computers. It's very creative. We're so proud of her for trying. The conversation quickly turned to my cousin's new position at a prestigious hospital. Standing in my office, surrounded by the tangible evidence of my success that my family had never seen, I felt the familiar knot form in my stomach. Why did their opinion still matter? Why, after building something so significant, did I still crave their validation? I started typing several responses, deleting each one. Actually, I'm quite successful. Delete. I run a multi-million-dollar company. Delete. Maybe you should Google me before assuming I'm unemployed. Delete. The truth was, words alone wouldn't change their perception. They had 5 years of dismissing my business as a hobby, a phase, a delay in starting my real career. They had built a narrative about me as the struggling youngest child who couldn't quite get it together. And that story was comfortable for them. It positioned them as the wise, stable ones, and me as needing their guidance. Breaking that narrative would require more than a text message. It would require evidence they couldn't ignore or minimize. And suddenly, with perfect timing, the universe had provided exactly that opportunity. I took a deep breath and typed, "I'll be there at 7. Returning to the conference table, I found it difficult to focus on the acquisition details. The legal team noticed my distraction but attributed it to pre-announcement nerves. Only Jordan, observing from the corner, could read the tension in my shoulders and jaw. She approached as the meeting concluded. "Everything okay?" I showed her the family chat. Her eyebrows rose as she read the messages. "Are you serious? Today of all days?" Apparently, the universe has a flair for dramatic timing. "What are you going to do?" I looked at the messages again, years of accumulated hurt crystallizing into determination. "I'm going to attend their emergency meeting." The irony was almost too perfect. On the day of my greatest professional triumph, my family had decided to intervene about my perceived failure. The disconnect between their image of me and reality had never been so stark, so laughably wrong, and so painful. I had spent years downplaying my success, deflecting their concerns, and enduring their pity. The weight of being misunderstood by the people who should know you best is a unique kind of loneliness. Despite the friends, colleagues, and employees who respected me, there remained a hollow space where family validation should have been. As I prepared for both the board meeting and the family confrontation, I felt emotionally exhausted. Why did I still need their approval? I had proven myself by every objective measure of success. I had created something valuable, employed hundreds of people, and was about to close a historic deal. Yet, some childlike part of me still wanted my parents to put my achievement on the refrigerator door. The board meeting was scheduled for 5:30 p.m. The family intervention at 7 o'clock. The timing was tight but manageable, and perhaps for the first time, I was ready to let my worlds collide. Back at my desk, I stared at my phone, the family chat still open. The screen dimmed from inactivity, then went dark, as if sensing the heaviness of my thoughts. How should I handle tonight? Walk in quietly and endure their intervention? Present them with magazine articles and business valuations? Send a corporate gift basket with a note saying, "Sorry, can't make it, too busy running my billion-dollar company?" My reflection in the darkened phone screen looked tired, not from the acquisition process, but from years of emotional labor navigating family relationships where I was perpetually misunderstood. The phone lit up with an incoming call. Jordan's name flashed on the screen. I answered, putting it on speaker as I continued reviewing documents. Miss Cecilia, she said, her voice vibrating with barely contained excitement, the board is ready for your $1.5 billion acquisition announcement. They're waiting in the main conference room, and the Global Systems CEO just arrived. The press release is finalized, and the communications team is standing by for your approval to distribute it at market close. She continued with more details. The champagne is chilled for the employee announcement, and I've confirmed reservations for the executive dinner at Harrington's. Also, Forbes, TechCrunch, and the Wall Street Journal have all requested exclusive interviews following the public announcement. As Jordan spoke, an idea formed in my mind, crystallizing with perfect clarity. I glanced at the family chat again, then back at the acquisition documents on my desk. Jordan, I said, I need a favor. After the board meeting, could you call me at exactly 7:15 p.m. with an update on the Global Systems CEO's comments? It's important. Of course, she replied, professional as always, despite the unusual request. Is everything all right? It will be, I said. My family has called an emergency meeting tonight to discuss my joblessness. I think it's time they learned what I actually do. Jordan's brief silence spoke volumes. She had seen the text messages, heard the condescending voicemails, witnessed my quietness after family gatherings. 7:15 exactly, she confirmed. I'll make it appropriately formal. Thank you, I said, feeling a weight lift slightly. And Jordan, make sure the call covers specific details about the acquisition amount and my role moving forward. With pleasure, she replied, and I could hear the smile in her voice. With that decided, I quickly texted the family group. I'll be there at 7. Short, simple, giving away nothing. The responses came immediately. Mom. Thank you, sweetie. We'll have dinner ready. Dad. Good. This is important. Nicholas. Bringing some resources for you. Thomas. Smart decision, sis. Each message carried the same patronizing tone that had colored our interactions for years, but tonight would be different. Tonight, the dynamic would shift irrevocably. I moved through the afternoon with renewed purpose. The board meeting was a success with unanimous approval of the acquisition. The Global Systems CEO spoke about the visionary security approach that had made Innovate Tech an irresistible addition to their portfolio. The company-wide announcement was met with cheers and applause from employees who would all receive bonuses from the deal. Through it all, part of my mind remained fixed on the evening ahead. As the business celebrations wound down, I went to my private bathroom to change. I removed my standard office attire and put on what I privately called my power suit, a tailored black Armani that projected quiet confidence. I refreshed my makeup and straightened my shoulders. The woman in the mirror looked successful, confident, powerful. Would my family finally see it? Or would they look at the same woman they'd always seen? A little girl playing business, waiting to grow up and get a real job? The drive to my parents' suburban home took 40 minutes, each mile bringing a new memory. Passing my old high school, I remembered my father's lukewarm response to the student business award I'd received senior year. Nice hobby, but focus on college applications. Driving by Boston University, I recalled my mother's disappointment when I changed my major from pre-law to business. Such a broad, unfocused degree. As familiar streets gave way to the tree-lined avenue of my childhood, I rehearsed potential scenarios. Would they be angry when they discovered I'd hidden my success? Would they suddenly become supportive after years of doubt? Would they try to take credit somehow? We always believed in you, seemed like the most likely revision of history. I questioned whether my approach was healthy. Was I being petty, orchestrating a dramatic revelation? Perhaps, but after years of having my achievements dismissed and my passion treated as a phase, perhaps I had earned a moment of vindication. The neighborhood hadn't changed much. Same manicured lawns, same tasteful holiday decorations adorning doorways. I pulled into my parents' driveway behind Nicholas's BMW and Thomas's Mercedes. My own car, a Tesla Model S, looked somewhat out of place, but I doubted they would notice. They had long ago stopped seeing evidence that contradicted their narrative about me. Sitting in my car, I took deep breaths to center myself. This confrontation wasn't just about proving them wrong. It was about being seen for who I truly was, about standing firm in my own reality after years of having it denied. It was about breaking free from the role I'd been assigned in our family drama. Unsuccessful daughter, perpetual disappointment, cautionary tale. My phone buzzed with a text from Jordan. All set for 7:15. Go getting, boss. With one final deep breath, I gathered my courage and stepped out of the car. Whatever happened inside that house, our family dynamic would never be the same. And maybe that was exactly what we all needed. I rang the doorbell of my childhood home. It was a strange formality for a place where I once had a key, but it felt appropriate for the occasion. My mother opened the door. Her expression a practiced mixture of concern and disappointment that I'd seen countless times. "Cecilia, sweetie," she said, pulling me into a hug that felt more obligatory than warm. "Come in. Everyone's waiting." The living room had been arranged like an intervention, which I supposed it was. My father occupied his usual armchair, reading glasses perched on his nose as he reviewed what appeared to be notes. Nicholas and Thomas sat side by side on the couch, a united front of brotherly concern. Between them on the coffee table lay folders and printouts, various resources for my apparent jobless situation. "Right on time," my father said, checking his watch with approval. Punctuality was among the few virtues he consistently acknowledged in me. I took the lone chair positioned across from them, feeling like a defendant facing a tribunal. The setup was designed, consciously or not, to establish authority and create pressure. I had used similar arrangements in tough negotiations, though never with family. My father cleared his throat and began what sounded like a rehearsed speech. "Cecilia, we've called this family meeting because we're concerned. It's been 5 years since you left a stable position at a reputable company to pursue this entrepreneurial experiment." He emphasized the word as if it were a phase like a teenager's goth period. "At some point, we need to acknowledge when something isn't working and make appropriate adjustments." My mother reached over to squeeze my hand. "Sweetie, there's no shame in admitting it didn't work out. Everyone has setbacks." Nicholas leaned forward, opening a folder. "I've compiled some job listings that might be a good fit. They're entry-level, but with your background, you could advance quickly." "The job market is competitive," Thomas added. "But with family connections, we can get your foot in the door." He slid a printout toward me. "Our firm needs a new receptionist. It's not glamorous, but the benefits are excellent. And you'd be working in a professional environment again." I sat quietly, absorbing their words without interruption. The assumptions layered in their statements were staggering. They had constructed an entire narrative about my life and career, without once asking substantive questions about what I actually did. They mistook my silence for shame or acceptance. My father continued, his voice taking on the authoritative tone he used when dispensing financial wisdom. "Your mother and I have been subsidizing your apartment for long enough. This was news to me, as I had never taken money from them. It's time to face reality. This business experiment has failed. There's no market for whatever website service you've been trying to sell." My mother nodded sympathetically. "Do you need money for rent again this month, dear?" she asked, though I had never asked them for rent money. I finally spoke, keeping my voice calm and measured. "Have any of you ever actually researched my company, Innovate Tech Solutions? Even a simple Google search?" The question seemed to confuse them. My father waved his hand dismissively. "We know it's some kind of website business, computer stuff, very small scale. Local clients only, right?" Nicholas added, his tone suggesting this was a limitation rather than a choice. "Something about security for online shops," Thomas guessed vaguely. Before I could respond, my phone rang. I checked the time. 7:15 exactly. Jordan was nothing if not precise. "Excuse me. I need to take this," I said, answering the call and putting it on speaker. "Jordan, I'm with my family. You're on speaker." Jordan's crisp, professional voice filled the room. "Miss Cecilia, the board is ready for your $1.5 billion acquisition announcement. The Global Systems CEO is asking if you want to make any changes to the press release before it goes live to the markets tomorrow morning. He specifically wants to highlight your continued role as CEO of their new security division and the retention of all 237 Innovate Tech employees." The silence that followed was absolute. My father's mouth hung slightly open, his reading glasses sliding down his nose. My mother's hand froze midway to her teacup. Nicholas stared at the phone as if it had suddenly started speaking in tongues. Thomas blinked rapidly, his brain visibly struggling to reconcile this information with his understanding of reality. "Thank you, Jordan," I replied calmly. "Please tell him the press release is approved as written. I'll be available for the media calls starting at 9 a.m. tomorrow. Has the employee celebration package been finalized?" "Yes, Miss Cecilia. All employees will receive their acquisition bonuses with tomorrow's announcement, ranging from $10,000 for our newest team members to $2 million for the executive team, as you specified." "Excellent. And the charitable foundation?" "The paperwork is complete. The Innovate Tech Foundation will launch with an initial endowment of $50 million, focused on technology education for underserved communities." "Perfect. Thank you, Jordan. I'll call you back later." I ended the call and placed my phone on the coffee table, directly on top of the receptionist job listing Thomas had prepared for me. For pairs of eyes stared at me in stunned silence. 1.5 billion. My father finally managed, the words coming out as if each one required separate processing. "Your company was acquired?" my mother asked, her voice faint. "You have over 200 employees?" Nicholas added, incredulous. Thomas simply opened and closed his mouth like a fish out of water. The moment was everything I had imagined and more. The shocked expressions, the disbelief giving way to dawning comprehension. But instead of satisfaction, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. Vindication? Yes, but also sadness for the years of support I had missed, anger at being so thoroughly misunderstood, and a strange sense of liberation. "Yes," I said simply. "Innovate Tech Solutions, the company I founded 5 years ago after leaving Global Tech, has been acquired by Global Systems for $1.5 billion. We specialize in scalable security solutions for businesses of all sizes, from local shops to international corporations. We have 237 employees across 3 offices, clients in 48 states and 6 countries, and annual revenue exceeding $70 million. I let the information sink in before continuing, my voice gaining strength. "For 5 years, I've built this company while you all assumed I was failing. For 5 years, I've listened to your condescending advice, your pitying offers of help, your dismissal of my career as a hobby or a phase. Not once did any of you actually ask about my business in a way that showed genuine interest. Not once did you Google my company or check any business news, where I've been featured repeatedly. The dam had broken, and years of pent-up feelings came pouring out. Do you know what it's like to create something successful, and not be able to share it with your family? To sit at holiday dinners listening to financial advice from people who manage a fraction of the budget you do? To have your mother introduce you as still trying to figure things out, when you're running a multi-million-dollar company?" My father attempted to regain control of the situation. "Now, Cecilia, we were just concerned about you. If you had told us." "I tried," I interrupted, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "Remember when I mentioned securing a major client at Christmas 3 years ago? Mom changed the subject to Thomas's law firm. Remember when I tried to join the investment conversation at the Cape? Thomas told me not to worry my pretty little head about boring financial stuff. Every time I started to share something about my company, you all made it clear you weren't interested unless it involved me giving up and getting a real job done." I turned to each family member in turn, addressing specific memories. "Dad, when I won the Innovator of the Year award last year, I called to tell you, and you spent the entire conversation telling me about Nicholas's new deck. Mom, when my company was featured in Business Insider, I emailed you the article, and you replied asking if I'd considered going back to school for a teaching certificate like you. Nicholas, you've sent me entry-level job listings every month for 5 years without once asking if I actually needed a job. And Thomas, you've offered me administrative positions at your firm so many times I've lost count, always with that same condescending smile." The room was silent except for my breathing, which had become ragged with emotion. My family looked shell-shocked, their worldview visibly crumbling around them. "Why didn't you just tell us how successful you were?" my mother finally asked in a small voice. The question ignited a fresh wave of frustration. Why did I have to? Why couldn't you have believed in me from the beginning? Why did you assume I was failing without evidence? Do you have any idea how much it hurts to have your family consistently think the worst of you? My words hung in the air, heavy with years of accumulated pain. The confrontation I had imagined so many times was finally happening. But instead of feeling triumphant, I felt drained. The truth was out, but the damage of years of dismissal couldn't be undone with one dramatic revelation. My father adjusted his glasses, visibly struggling to process the new reality. "We had no idea," he said, his voice uncharacteristically uncertain. "You always downplayed everything. You said you were making it work, or figuring things out. Because every time I tried to share more, you made it clear you weren't interested unless it fit your definition of success," I replied, the fight draining from my voice. After a while, it was easier to say nothing than to have my achievements dismissed. We had reached the moment of truth, the point where our family dynamic would either begin to heal or fracture beyond repair. The ball was in their court now. How they responded would determine the path forward. A heavy silence filled the room after my emotional outburst. No one seemed to know what to say next. The family's script had been shattered, leaving us all without familiar lines to fall back on. The clock on the mantel ticked loudly, marking seconds that felt like hours. My father was the first to attempt recovery, his accountant's mind seemingly grappling with the numbers I had presented. 1.5 billion, he repeated, as if testing the sound of it. "Cecilia, that's extraordinary. But surely you understand our concern. We were just worried about you." It was a classic Robert Davis move, trying to reframe his actions as parental concern rather than acknowledging the judgment and dismissal. I had expected this, but it still stung. "Dad, there's a difference between concern and condescension," I said quietly. "You weren't worried about me. You were embarrassed by what you perceived as my failure." My mother dabbed at the corners of her eyes with a tissue. "That's not fair, Cecilia. We love you. We only want what's best for you." "The best, according to whose definition?" I asked. "Did you ever consider that I might have a different vision for my life than what you wanted for me?" Nicholas shuffled his folder of job listings awkwardly. I thought I was helping," he muttered. "Thomas, always the lawyer, tried a different approach. You have to admit you were secretive about your work. How were we supposed to know you were building something substantial?" "By asking," I said simply. "By showing genuine interest. By Googling my company name, which would have shown dozens of articles and industry awards. By treating me like an adult capable of making her own decisions, rather than a child who needed intervention." The initial shock was wearing off, making way for a complex mix of emotions around the room. My father looked both proud and uncomfortable, clearly calculating how to incorporate this new information into his worldview. My mother appeared torn between joy at my success and hurt at being excluded from it. My brothers showed a combination of amazement and what looked suspiciously like jealousy. As the evening wore on, the initial shock and defensive responses gradually gave way to more genuine exchanges. My father, in a moment of rare vulnerability, admitted, "I projected my own fears onto you. The idea of building something from nothing terrified me. I'm proud of you, Cecilia. I should have said that years ago." My mother pulled me aside in the kitchen, tears in her eyes. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I should have tried harder to understand your world." Even Nicholas eventually said, "I guess I was wrong about you." A year has passed since that unforgettable night. The change wasn't instant, but it was real. Our Sunday dinners are different now. The condescending questions have been replaced with genuine curiosity. My father now reads tech journals and asks me about market trends. Thomas, the lawyer, even admitted he uses one of my company's security products at his firm and is impressed by it. And Nicholas, in a move that surprised us all, started his own small business, inspired, he said, by my courage to forge my own path. Last week, my mother framed the Wall Street Journal article about the acquisition and hung it on the living room wall, right next to my brother's degrees. Seeing it there, I didn't feel the smug satisfaction I once craved, but a quiet sense of peace. The family-shaped hole in my heart was finally beginning to heal. The road to success is often paved with the doubts of others, sometimes even the people we love most. If my story resonated with you, Hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about overcoming the odds and proving your worth. Have you ever had a moment where you completely shattered someone's perception of you? Drop your story in the comments below. I'd love to read it. Thank you for watching, and always have the courage to believe in your own vision, even if you're the only one who can see it.